Module number 16, Hacking Wireless Networks. Let's have a look at what we're going to go over in Module 16. In Module 16, we're going to start with a summarization of what's happening with wireless. Also, we're going to look at some of the different encryption methodologies, algorithms. I'll take a little time and do maybe not a super deep dive, but a little bit of a dive into what's going on there. And then we'll also look at the different wireless threats that are out there, and there are many of them. And then lastly, we're going to do these two, which is the hacking methodology, which is extremely important, obviously. And then we'll look at some countermeasures for wireless. So that's what we're going to get into in this module. Let's get started. When we think of wireless, notice it doesn't say Wi-Fi on this module. It says wireless. We're going to focus on Wi-Fi, but there are all kinds of wireless protocols. If there's an entire EM spectrum that is used by a variety of devices. For instance, this right here, this is my little Bluetooth watch, and my heart rate is 88 beats per minute, and it's tied into my phone, and that's wireless too. But Bluetooth hacking is a lot less, I would say, a lot less prevalent than it has been in the past because of the way Bluetooth is implemented these days. So we're going to just focus on mainly Wi-Fi, which is going to be the 802.11 suite of IEEE protocols. Okay, so when we look at Wi-Fi, it is very well implemented everywhere. One of the things that I like to think about is, can you imagine if there was no Wi-Fi? You go into an airport, like the airport in Atlanta, Hartsfield. Have you been in that one before? And you know how huge it is, all those different sections that divide it. And what if you're in one of those little sections with the history, and if you've never been there, it's actually pretty cool. You might want to walk if you go to Atlanta. It's pretty cool going between the sections there. But what if you needed to get on the internet, and instead of getting Wi-Fi, you had to take out your laptop, take out a cable, find a jack in the wall, and plug it into the wall? Can you imagine how many hundreds of miles of cable that would be to wire the entire airport for every single use? It would be tremendously expensive and really cost prohibitive. So Wi-Fi or wireless makes it so that you can tie networks together, be mobile, go different places, everything from what we have with cellular, a little bit integrating satellite with that, and then we look at some of the technologies that we have that can put networks together. For instance, if you have a larger house, you may have an upstairs and a downstairs, and you tie those networks together. Perhaps you work in a large company and you have upstairs, downstairs, well, first and second and third and fourth floors, and many other locations, and they're tied together using Wi-Fi. So they're just a tremendous number of ways that you could put together wireless architectures to help your organization, your family, etc. So if, in fact, what I'd like you to do, check this out. Open up a tab on your browser and go to your search engine and type in 802.11 space Wikipedia. 802.11 space Wikipedia. Hit enter, and then that first link will be the link to the Wikipedia article on the 802.11 protocol. Then scroll, and you'll find a gigantic table of which this is a subsection of that, right? So that gigantic table of all those 802.11 protocols, and by the way, you can sort by time, and you'll see the top of the table starts with 1997, and it goes all the way on to the future, actually looks at some of the future protocols that are coming out. But you'll notice that we have things like the actual amendment, and these are working, the working group is the .11 working group for the IEEE. And then the frequency modulation, how that signal is modulated onto the carrier. And then we have the multiple speeds, and then we have the ranges. And this gives you a wide variety of ranges. But this table actually goes beyond what you see in the Wikipedia article, because in this table, we go beyond the 802.11 working group and we slide on into the 802.15 working group, which is for the smaller protocols. And so we have Bluetooth and Zigbee. We'll see a lot more with Zigbee when we get into IoT. And then you have the idea of WiMAX. This is an area that recently I've wanted to revisit. Back in around the turn of the century, WiMAX had become a really big deal, because what you could do is you have a computer or a laptop and you just need an interface or a dongle, and anywhere in a city you could get Wi-Fi. So it's for a much longer range. If you look at what it says over here, you'll see that the range is 1 to 6 miles. So it's quite huge. But I had not seen WiMAX in a long time, and I had thought that perhaps it wasn't in use anymore. And recently, over the last year, when I did a lookup, it's like, wow, they're still developing that protocol. So I want to see where in the world it's in use. I think I might do that. All right, so with Wi-Fi, so what you have is you have two major components. You have the supplicant. The supplicant is the device. It could be your phone, it could be your laptop, it could be your desktop, it could be your car, whatever it is that is connecting to the other component, which is an AP, or an access point. One of the things that you want to be aware of with the access point is that that access point is the gateway to the network. So let's have a look here. So this access point will be connected to a switch port. And then that switch port doesn't just go to the internet. Often that switch port will be going to a core switch. Put a C there for core. It's supposed to be a C, you know. I'm trying to draw here. And then that'll go out to other locations around the network. So what's going to happen is you're going to have to do a good job of securing this switch port into which this wireless access point is plugged in. Also, for instance, for this switch port right over here, or this switch port, they may be locked down. We talked about some of the things you can do on a Cisco device to lock down those switch ports. But sometimes you just plug the access point in without really securing that port. This gives a window into the network of attack. So this is why securing Wi-Fi is so important. So we want to secure all of that stuff, that switch port, etc. In my house, basically it's almost like this, where it goes straight to the internet, but not in a company, an organization. So what we have here in this authentication process is what's called a handshake. And so when the supplicant contacts the access point is doing what's called beaconing. It's saying, hey, I'm here, and it gives you information about itself. We'll talk more about this as we get deeper into this process. But first of all, there's going to be authentication requests sent in, and there's going to be an exchange. If you notice number 3, it says the client encrypts the challenge text and sends it back to the AP. And we're going to see that in a little while. And eventually they exchange that hash, and the client is allowed into the network. And the problem with that is if I can hack that hash, that allows me into the interior network, and they may not want me there because I'm hacking the network. So that's why we have another type of access. If you look over here, this is what we call 802.1x. Now, I'll also commend the Wikipedia article on 802.1x to you. That is very good. I like Wikipedia's technical articles. So if you type in 802.1x space Wikipedia in your browser, you'll find a good explanation of how this works. But what this does is the wireless access point says, excuse me, but no, I don't do that anymore. I'm going to have this Radius server. So this is the remote authentication dial-in user service. And I want you to notice something about the Radius acronym. Dial in. This comes from way back in the days of modems. So back in the days of modems, what would happen is you would hit the button to connect, or double click on the icon to connect to your ISP, and you hear a all these noises, and then you would connect. But what happened is, since it became so worldwide, so nationwide, they needed to decentralize the authentication process. And this was part of that decentralization. So Radius is pretty old, right? But either way, what will happen is this access point will say, I don't do that anymore. And it'll send the authentication request to the Radius server. So what the Radius server is doing is it is connecting out to another server periodically. So let me dial this up here. So I'm going to draw this server here. This is Active Directory, for instance. So it's a directory service. And in this directory service I'm going to just draw a folder here in a happy face, right? These are all the user accounts that are stored. All right, and then what will happen is each of these accounts have thousands of attributes. But this Radius server doesn't need all those attributes. So you get a subset of the attributes, like the username, information about the department, a phone number, or something like that, right? Not 1,000 attributes, but maybe 10 attributes. So that way they store a lot easier on the Radius server. So periodically, there's a communication update going out to a subset of Active Directory that gives a subset of the account attributes to the Radius server. And so now this user on this side, the client, when they get handed over to the Radius server, this client here, he's using his own account from work, from that Active Directory server. And now this Radius server will compare the information and send back a authentication authorization. And then just like we see over here, this access point that's connected up to that switch will now grant access to the supplicant, and now it's on the network. So this, if it's 802.1x, it could be Radius. It could be the Diameter protocol. We've been talking about Diameter for a long time. Are you running the Diameter protocol? If you're running the Diameter protocol, hit me up on LinkedIn. I want to hear people who are running the Diameter protocol, because I hear it all the time, and none of my clients, nobody I know uses it. But other protocols would be like EAP, TACACS Plus, and other types of protocols. So either way, now that device is on the network. And with that, we clear the screen and close that out. All right, in our second learning objective, we're going to talk a little bit about the wireless protocols. And like I told you, we're going to do a mini deep dive into how some of this works so that you can be clear on what's going on. Now, when we go to our first one here, it's WEP. What I always tell my students is, if you find a WEP network, what should you do? And the answer is, ask whoever owns it, hey, do you mind if I hack this? Because it's very easy and fun to hack. And this happened to me once, it was about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more. And one of my kids was having a birthday party, and it was at the other kid's grandparents' house. And while I was there, I asked the father of the grandparents, anyway, I asked the guy what their login was, and I realized, oh, this is a WEP network. Guess what I asked? Do you mind if I hack this? And his answer was, sure. So I had my opportunity to hack a WEP network live, and it was legal. It was nice. So let's have a look here at what's going on with WEP. I want to show you here, we have a lot of terms going on. We have a key store. We have a WEP seed that's created from the WEP key and the IV initialization vector. We have a very important core here that we're going to see in the WPA section also, and we'll also see it in the cryptographic area, which is the RC4 cipher. And then we create a key stream, and we have a process here that actually all these go together and get XORed, and then we finally create the final output. But let's have a look at what happens. So if you look over here at the IV, WEP uses a 24-bit initialization vector. We're going to see IVs quite a lot in this module. That's combined with a WEP key right over here, right? That forms what's called the WEP seed, which initializes the RC4 cipher There are a couple different major types of ciphers. This is a stream cipher, not a block cipher. All right, so it initializes the cipher for encryption. So the WEP key is a pre-shared key, and all the devices on the entire network know this key. And whenever you see a WEP key, they're distinctive because they have all these like sets or blocks of characters, unlike a pre-shared key for WPA or WPA2 that is arbitrary. In other words, I can create my own pre-shared key. With a WEP key, it's blocks of characters if you've ever seen it. All right, let's continue. So if we look here, we also have the RC4 over here. I was just talking about that. And we have the WEP seed that's processed by it. And that's going to generate what's called a key stream. And that key stream is what actually encrypts the data. So another thing we have is another acronym, which is the ICV. The ICV is the integrity check value. And so that data is appended with that integrity check value. And it's generated using what's called a CRC32 checksum. So the purpose of the checksum is to make sure that all of the bits, not a single 1 or a 0, is flipped. So we have what's called data integrity at this point, right? So that's what we're doing. And then the next thing we do is the whole key stream is combined with the data and the ICV. That's here's a key stream down here using an XOR algorithm. If you're not familiar with the XOR process, I would suggest going out to Mr. Internet and doing a little lookup on XORing, because we're going to see that coming up also when we get to the last module. So that's the XOR process. And so what we have resulting is an encrypted packet, which is the ciphertext. So the packet construction, the encrypted data along with the initialization vector, the key ID, that's KID, and the padding to make sure everything is the same size, is sent in a WEP encrypted packet over the internet. Now, let's look over here at the IV. This IV is 24 bits. It's too short. You can have what are called IV collisions, allowing an attacker to capture enough packets, we're going to see this in just a little while, to deduce that encryption key. So that's why we get attacks. Another thing is RC4. Not only is RC4 weak as an encryption protocol, but here with WEP, it's not even implemented according to the specifications for it. And then also we have poor key management and no replay protection. So WEP turns out to be very weak. So WEP was called WEP, right? Wired equivalency privacy. Wired equivalency. That means that this communication is just as good as if I plugged into the wire. And it turned out to be absolutely fallacious, which means totes wrong. It was wrong, right? So the wireless industry, if you were to watch the press at the time, I always delve into the techno press, and they're really thinking that maybe this wireless thing wasn't going to work. Maybe wireless would be given up. But technologies came online to save wireless for the time when it would come into its ascendancy. And some of those technologies are things like this, WPA. So let's look at WPA. WPA is Wi-Fi protected access. It is better than WPA. One of the issues is the permanent nature of some of the keying and so on. With WEP was the permanent nature, but with WPA we have the TKIP protocol, which is temporal key integrity protocol. So what we're doing here is we're making things move around a lot more. So the temporal key integrity protocol helped to really address some of the vulnerabilities with its predecessor, which is good. And so it generates a unique encryption key for each packet of data. So for every packet of data, unique key. So better security. What it does is called key mixing. So it uses this process where you have what's called TEC or temporal encryption key with other parameters like the TSC right down here. That TSC is the temporal sequence counter, which includes the initialization vector right here, and over here the EIV, the extended initialization vector. So this is what generates a unique WEP key for every packet. So this key mixing is extremely important. And then we have the RC4 cipher. Again, using the RC4 cipher, we both have it in WEP, and here in WPA is the last bastion of the RC4 cipher in wireless. And so with the RC4 cipher, the WEP seed that we see up here is fed into the RC4 cipher to create a key stream. And then the key stream is actually going to be used to encrypt the data packet so that we have a nice, tightly secured, confidential data packet. And then we have a good old MIC. And MIC is used right up here for integrity checking. And instead of what we saw, the CRC32 in the previous one. And so, so WPA is going to have MIC. It's going to be using the Michael algorithm, which you see right there. That is all part of the integrity checking. What we're trying to do here is defend against tampering. And then we have the transmission, the packet transmission. So the final packet, it's going to have the encrypted data, MIC, and a bunch of other relevant stuff like the MAC header, initialization vector, the key ID, and the EIV. And then the packet is going to be transmitted securely over the network. So problems with this, RC4 again is vulnerable. The Michael algorithm that's used for the integrity check, it's an improvement, but it's not immune to certain types of attacks. Also, it has some performance overheads, so it makes it less efficient than what was to come, but WEP was an improvement. So what happened in the history of wireless access is really this saved, WPA saved Wi-Fi, saved wireless, and it started growing again. And it didn't catch on like wildfire yet, but you started to see it pop up more in small businesses and in homes. The next one we have is WPA2. Now, WPA2, when it came online, it really saved Wi-Fi and caused it to spread all over the planet. Let's talk about WPA2. So with WPA2, there are now two modes, personal and enterprise. When I was talking about 802.1x, that was enterprise mode with EAP or Radius or TACACS Plus back in the day and other ones. So, what the big deal about WPA2 is the core of this, which is AES. AES was CCMP. So what happens is WPA2 replaced that nice but antiquated RC4 cipher in WPA with AES, Advanced Encryption Standard. Let me just talk a little bit about AES. We're going to get much deeper into AES when we get into Module 20 and talk about cryptography. But AES is actually the result of a contest. So what happened is the DES, or DES, which was the encryption standard of the day, turned out to be hackable. So the government of the United States had a contest to try to figure out who could make a better encryption protocol. And one of the ones that won this NIST contest was called Rindell. And Rindell got renamed to AES. And when we get into the cryptography section, we'll do a quick overview because it's actually pretty deep about the methodologies that AES brings to play that are masterful at the mathematics level. Pretty amazing how AES works. So AES being brought into play really, really helped make this catch on. Why did AES being in the mix help out so much? Well, because at the time, and even now, if you are working for the government of the United States of America, or in the military in the United States of America, and you want to use an encryption protocol, it has to be AES. So you could not use WPA, and now we have WPA2 that you can use. So it has CCNP, which we'll see again, module 20, which is a counter mode with Cipher blockchain message authentication protocol for three things: confidentiality, integrity, and authentication. So AES with CCNP provides all of those. Now, there's going to be something that's going to come into play. We've already talked about it just a little bit before, which is this cryptographic nonce. So we have for each packet, you generate a unique nonce, right? This is random as we can have. I mean, for those of you who study physics, one of the things, one of my favorite fascinating subjects is theoretical physics. And when you look at the difference between randomness and what's called stochastic, right? Stochastic means that it can be predicted by some type of equation. It looks like the universe is actually not random at all, which opens up a whole Pandora's box of what things are going on. That's one of my favorite things to study, is the differences between that. Periodically, there are arguments as to whether randomness exists or not. But let's have a look here. We're going to try to get it as random as possible when we generate this nonce, as random as possible. And then the nonce is combined with the temporal key, the plain text data, and then it's inputted into AES CCNP, into the algorithm, to generate the encrypted data. And then what we're going to do next is run a MIC on it. That message integrity check is going to be very important. And we're going to generate a message integrity code. There's the encrypted MIC down here. And what we're going to do is we're going to have that message integrity code to make sure that the packet hasn't been tampered with. So the core of this, though, is the fact that we're running it through AES CCNP, and it's handled very well, mathematically well, technically well. And so this is why WPA2 is still in play today. Now, some of the problems with WPA2, number one, and we'll see this in just a few minutes here. But number one is the way that personal mode works allows hacking to occur. And then also, when we look at the enterprise mode, certain forms of that enterprise authorization are hackable, specifically focused on radius. All right, so let's have a look then at a newer protocol. And this newer protocol is called WPA3. Now, if you were to go to Best Buy or that small German specialty boutique called Walmart, Walmart, you've been there before, you might find a wireless access point that uses WPA3. In fact, almost everyone that you buy these days uses WPA3. We'll talk about some of the things you need to do with WPA3. But WPA3 has this thing called SAE, we're going to talk about in a moment, instead of the handshake that WPA2 did. And it makes it much more resistant to attacks. And then with WPA3 Enterprise, we have a very nicely put together enterprise operation here that gives us HMAC SHA-384 and NEC-DSA 384 for key exchange. We'll talk more about key exchange. We'll talk more about encryption when we get to our last module. But both these are really cool. Let's just talk a little bit about the way that WPA3 does its personal mode. So if you look here on the slide, you'll see we have the SAE protocol, right? This is the simultaneous authentication of equals. So this is a lot different than what we were talking about. Also known as the Dragonfly key exchange. And so what happens with this is we have this thing called PAKE, or PAKE, which is the password-based authentication key exchange that replaces the PSK that we used to have. So some of the features that you might think about when you look at WPA3 personal is it's really resistant to dictionary attacks. In WPA2, you can capture the handshake and analyze it. And this is mitigated by making sure that the shared secret is actually never, ever exposed. So you can't even do any guessing, makes it more difficult. And then there's this thing also when you look at this is called forward secrecy, which means that even if the attacker was able to later get the network's password, they can decrypt previous communications. So that's pretty cool too. And then also, this gives us mutual authentication. And so it's much more resistant to attacks. So there are multiple phases to this. There are 3 of them, and we're not going to go over them in depth, but there's a commit phase, a confirm phase, and a key derivation encryption phase. And so this is actually a very nice way of encrypting the transaction. But I want you to focus on one thing here, and I'm going to bring this back up in just a little while. But the word Dragonfly, so SAE is called the Dragonfly key exchange. And why do I bring up this word? Well, because the attacks against the SAE protocol have the word dragon in them. So if on the exam you have something that talks about a wireless attack and has the word dragon in it, it's probably talking about WPA3. So also we have a little comparison between the protocols, WEP versus WPA versus WPA2, and it talks about the key management, integrity checking, encryption length, and we see it gets better and better as we move down through each of the protocols, which is very nice. But a couple things I want to talk about. Number one is when you have a choice and you want the best encryption, what you really want to do is choose WPA3. And what you want to do when you choose WPA3, let's say you're in an organization that has 1,000 employees, 1,000 devices. What you want to do is make sure all of them are using WPA3. There's something very interesting about WPA3 that I found fascinating. Is if you look at the initialization vector size, with WPA3, it could be an arbitrary length from 1 to 2 to the 64. That's cray-cray. 2 to the 64? So I went to my Wolfram Alpha account, and I okay, what is 2 to the 64? My goodness, that's 18 quintillion, which is 18 billion billion, 20 decimal points. My goodness. That's a lot. But I asked an LLM about this, and it says increased memory requirements storing 2 to 64 bits requires a significant amount of memory. Specifically, storing a single IV would require 2 to the 61 bytes or 2 exabytes of RAM just to store the initialization vector. And I don't know about you, but I rarely buy laptops with 2 exabytes of RAM. I mean, it almost never, well, never will happen. But it's just funny to me. But so what really happens is if you look at what AES CCNP uses, normally you're just going to have the 48-bit IV size. This just leaves room open for the future. So no, you don't have to worry about getting 2 exabytes of RAM in your laptop. All right, so let's talk about some of the weaknesses of these protocols. And we've already talked a little bit about it, but let's do a little overview here. WEP, we talked about that. You can do plain text attacks. This is one of the best attackable protocols out there. RC4 was not implemented correctly. WPA, we have problems with TKIP. That came out fairly quickly when WPA came out. And you might be able to actually discover that GTK from the WPA. And then we have WPA2, which is prone to man-in-the-middle attacks. Oh, dictionary attacks, examining that pre-shared key, discovering that. And then with WPA3, it's much better, but we can examine the cryptographic algorithms using side-channel attacks. And then SAE might be vulnerable to timing. Again, another side-channel attack. So most of what we see with WPA3 is kind of not really done yet, except for there's one. So here's the attack for WPA3. There's a company that has 1,000 computers, and there's one, maybe it's like a copier or something like that, that can't do WPA3. So on the wireless access points, you allow it to switch to WPA2. And then somebody, an attacker, sneaks in a device, and the device says, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I cannot do WPA3. Can you please, Mr. Access Point, switch to WPA2 just for little old me?" And the wireless access point says, "Sure, little buddy, I can switch over for you. Here's some WPA2. And the little device, which is a hacker Raspberry Pi, says, "Thank you very much." And it starts laughing maniacally as it hacks WPA2 while everything else is on WPA3. Now, I have to admit, I've never heard a device laugh maniacally, but hey, it could happen. We are now in learning objective number 3, where we're going to explain some of the different wireless threats. Let's make it happen. So with wireless, well, all kinds of threats against wireless. It's like a window directly into the network through that switch port because you're connected directly to it. So there are many of these. I'm just going to highlight a few of them. For instance, MAC spoofing, that's easy to do. We'll talk about that. A promiscuous client. This is just one that has a Wi-Fi card that will be able to sniff all of the traffic. Over here we have bit flipping and extensible relay and a data replay. Oh, radius replay. That was a big one for a while, but radius has since locked down a little bit better. And then we have confidentiality attacks where you can read the data of the users, eavesdropping. We're going to look at these here, evil twins and honeypots. And then we have others, including availability attack. And so we have disassociation and deauthentication. Of all of these, probably that deauth is the one I would use the most, have used the most. And then over here, oh, hey, wait. TKIP, MIC. Yeah, that's definitely one of them. And then we have, oh yeah, this is my fave of this panel, which is PSK cracking. But we also have crack attacks, key reinstallation attacks. Those are not as popular as they were in 2016, 2017. And then password guessing. Those are going to be much more difficult. Here in learning objective número 4, number 4. Hey, I'm from New Mexico, speak some Spanish now and then. What we're going to do is look at the methodology that we use for wireless hacking. Let's have a look. Okay, so the wireless hacking methodology, we're going to start with discovery. We're going to move in to analysis. We're going to jump on into the actual attack. And then we're going to do some encryption cracking, and we're going to compromise the network. So that's what we're going to be doing. So first thing we want to do is do a little bit of footprinting, where we're going to connect to the network actively or passively. Passively, we might be using something like just a sniffer. And then actively, we might be doing like some type of ARP attack or something like that. Some of the tools that are very, very useful for this are things like Insider. I run this on my laptops now and then. It's not a bad tool at all. I think overall, I just like Wireshark, but some of these do give you a better view of the way things look by highlighting things and give you better visibility. So there's the Wi-Fi scanner and Acrylic. They make all kinds of Wi-Fi stuff. You might want to look at them if you are an enterprise student and you do this for your large company. And also Ekahau, very good set of tools. One of the areas that you might run into, and maybe you have, is let's say that you go to a friend's house. You're having a New Year's party, and people are showing up, and you show up, and you're a little late. I don't know why you were running late, but anyway, you're running a little late, and you get there, and you pull out your phone, and you're about to ask your friend what the pre-shared key is, but as you notice on your phone, when you select the network, it asks them to hit a button or something for WPS. And so you say, hey, Jack, that's his name. I just made it up. Hey, Jack, do you mind giving me access to your network? So what Jack does is he walks over to his little office in the corner of the apartment, and he pushes a button, and bada boom, you're connected. That is WPS. And another thing about WPS is it is hackable. So another thing you might want to do while you're at that party is ask your friend, hey, this is WPS. And you'll say, what do you mean by that? The way I connected. Do you mind if I hack your wireless network? And he'll say, yeah, go for it. Then go back to your car and then come back with your hacker laptop. And this is what you're going to use to hack WPS. And it will be fun. So what this is the WASH utility. So you use this to identify, over here you see WASH TAC-I or -I, and you use it on that wireless NIC to discover all the WPS enabled networks. And then the WASH command will go all the way up to 5 gigahertz, which is going to be good enough for most networks. And then you discover the AP, the BSSID of the router, and then you could do a sudo wash I LAN 0, then WAN 0, which is WLAN 0 is actually that particular Wi-Fi port. And then what you're going to do is you're going to run Reaver. So wash and Reaver is going to actually do the attack. Another thing that you can do is just analyze the traffic while you're there at your friend's New Year's party. They're going to wonder why you're in the corner with your laptop with all the hacker stickers on it, but you had permission. And this is a good thing to do at a party for someone who is a network guru and ethical hacker. So either way, what you're doing now is running through all the networks. Oh, hey, you found the neighbor's network. Hey, you found other things. So you can actually analyze wireless traffic, see what's going on, other tools, the Wi-Fi packet analyzer, and Air Magnet and G3 Pro, and like we see here, Wireshark and so on. So we can use lots of different tools to analyze the wireless network. Now, I would urge you to maybe get up and socialize while you're at this party. You might want to put your hacking laptop away. All right, next thing we do is we are setting up the hacking laptop. So before you went to that party with that hacking laptop, you had to do a few things. So this is something actually, a project I'm working on right now. So I got this old laptop. It's a Chromebook. And depending on the Chromebook, you can actually clear out the Chrome OS and put in a Linux OS. So, look this up. Open up a command prompt, and do a search on Katoolin. I think it's Katoolin. Katoolin. What it is it's a little tool that once you install, let's say you just install Ubuntu or some other type of Debian distro or something like that on your new laptop, then you can bring Katoolin in, and it'll install all the tools that you would get from a Parrot Security Linux or from a Kali Linux. And now you have a laptop. Sometimes they're free or it's a few $100 that runs all the hacker stuff. But there's a problem with that. Once you do that, it's possible that your Wi-Fi card, that internal card, two possibilities. Possibility number one is it cannot go into promiscuous mode. Possibility number two, when you replace the OS, the drivers no longer will run that internal card. So what you end up doing is getting a Wi-Fi dongle that will work with your OS and the drivers that are easy for it to run. And so that's why we need to know the capabilities. Can it go into promiscuous mode? Yes or no? And then does the chipset of that Wi-Fi card work with the drivers and my operating system? And then we verify that. And sometimes you will find that all you need to do is update the drivers and then it'll all work. But this is all about putting together the wireless part of that hacker laptop that you're creating. All right, so one of the tools that you're going to want to make sure that you have on that hacker laptop of yours, which you should have one, by the way, is AirCrack NG. AirCrack NG has a suite. This is actually not the full suite, but some of the tools in the suite. Airbase, which is a handshake analyzer. AirCrack for cracking WEP and WPA2, pre-shared keys. AirDecap, which decrypts WPA2 and can be used to strip headers from packets. Air dump for targeted rule-based deauthentication. This is my deauth tool. AirPlay, which you gather WEP IVs and WPA handshakes. AirMon to put that wireless network card into monitor mode so you can promiscuously gather frames. AirDump capturing the raw 802.11 frames, collecting those WEP IVs, and then AirLib, which manages the eSSID password list that are used in WPA2 cracking. And there are more. You can run AirCrack on your Windows box, although I really prefer AirCrack on Linux. So now let's have a look at making use of AirCrack to detect hidden SSIDs. I remember a conversation that I was listening to. This conversation has happened twice. It was a while back, so I'm hoping that this doesn't happen nowadays. But I was listening to two people talk. I think I was walking behind them, and in a technical context, and one of them saying, "Yeah, I don't need all that encryption and all that stuff. What I do is I just use Mac authentication and I hide my SSID. So my laptop is the only one that can be on my Wi-Fi network, and nobody can see my network." Not so fast. Not so fast. There's so much wrong with that. Number one is it's easy to run a sniff and see what devices are using what MAC address and grab that MAC address. Secondarily, if the SSID is hidden, well, then you can find that too. So the first thing you do is you run AirMon in monitor mode. And then the next thing you do is you start AirDump, start discovering SSIDs on the interface. There we go. Listing them out, right? And then from there, what you're going to do is run this command, which is mkd3. And when we run mkd3, we can brute force the hidden SSID and get the actual name of the hidden SSID. So now with a sniffer, we got their MAC address, and with a combination of AirDump and MDK3, excuse me, we're able to find that network. And by the way, this can be done with the AirCrack suite all by itself, but this tool makes it a little bit faster. So once you do that, then you have their MAC address and their wireless network, and so you can just modify your MAC address and jump on their wireless network. So that's why it's important to have more protection than that. All right, so I was talking about this a little bit earlier. There are two ways of doing a kind of a mini denial of service attack. This is called disassociation, where you knock them off the network, but they're still associated with the AP. The one that we use more often, though, is deauthentication. And you knock them off the AP and you disassociate them from their account. They're showing a sample of the command that's used to do that, which is the AirPlay NG --deauth command. Now, why is it that we do a deauth? And let's talk about this. I'm at a restaurant and I'm connected to the wireless access point in the restaurant, and working away, going on web apps and sites and so on. And then somebody sends me a deauth. What happens with that deauth? So I'm knocked off the network. Most Wi-Fi settings by default put a check in that little box that says auto reconnect. Auto reconnect. So what's going to happen is when I get deauthed off the network, my wireless access point is going to try to get right back on that network. Now, there are two things the attacker wants with this. Thing number one is to analyze that handshake, even if they're not going to run the main attack right now, but to analyze that handshake for use for another attack. Thing number two is to attract my device to the attacker twinned device. So they have the same BSSID, everything of the original access point, and their signal is stronger. So when my device does a reconnect, boom, I reconnect right to the attacker's stuff. That's what we're seeing right here. Let's have a look. So over here, the attacker sniffs their parameters, ESSID, BSSID, MAC address, right? We're just looking around here. Number 2, we send that DAuth with the spoofed source address of the victim's AP. Number 3, they get deauthentication, and guess what they're doing? They're now, you just go by milliseconds here, they're looking for that list. Where is my access point? Let me see if I can find it. And then number 4, the attacker has already forged an AP, and they are able to, with the same MAC address, ESSID, BSSID, whatever, cause that device to reconnect. Now, this device of this poor dude is going through the hacker's machine, so the hacker can just listen to, analyze, steal data, etc. Very typical type of attack. So how do you do that with AirCrack? We're not going to look at the whole thing here, but essentially you run airmon, and then you start AirDump to start discovering SSIDs, and then from here you do a DAuth, and then from here you associate your wireless card with the access point so that the victim's device can flow through you. Another one that's very interesting here is MAC spoofing. We already talked about this a little bit. I believe we talked about Technetium. If not, this is actually a very, very good tool for managing MAC spoofing. So if you need to change your MAC address on the fly. And another thing that you can do is, if you look down here, you can do an ifconfig. Ifconfig WLAN 0 down, and then you get the hardware Ethernet address, and then you change it, and then you bring it back up. However, do you know that ifconfig is deprecated? Look at that, there it goes. So what should we use for a deprecated command? Now, you can still use ifconfig all the time, anywhere you want, but I try to use the IP commands in Linux more than the ifconfig commands. So for IP, the first one you do is I type right here, IP link show, right? And then I go from there and I do an IP link set device or dev eth0 down. So we bring down that interface. Then the next thing I do is I do IP link set dev eth0 and then give it an address, right? So then now that it has a new address, the next thing I do is I bring it back up, IP link set dev eth0 up. And this could be WLAN 0 in the case of what we'll be doing, but I just demonstrated it on the Ethernet. And then you can see, reassure yourself, you know exactly that it did change the address by doing an IP link show eth0. So that IP link command is not deprecated, very easy to use, and so I just wanted to show it to you. Okay, so we can also do ARP poisoning. We spent a little bit of time when we're talking about man-in-the-middle attacks, talking about ARP poisoning. Essentially, it's the same way that we talked about earlier, and you can spoof MAC addresses, send those updated redirect traffic to the attacker. One of the tools that we use for that in MITMs in Wi-Fi is one of the same tools that we use for that in MITMs in wired networks, which is EtherCap, where we're going to launch EtherCap. We're going to sniff it. We're going to set up the primary interface. We're going to go and scan for hosts, get a host list, view your connections, get your targets, and then run your ARP poisoning. I'm not going to go into depths on each step. You'll see this more in different labs that we have on EtherCap. So we can use EtherCap for a nice little ARP poisoning attack. We can also launch rogue APs. There are so many different ways to launch rogue APs. You can use actual access points that you get online from Amazon or you pick up at Walmart, or you can configure your own device, or you can use a compact pocket size access point, things from about the size of one of your fingers all the way to maybe the size of a deck of cards, very easy, or even smaller than that. Set it up, sneak it around, and then what you want to do is just change that SSID, MAC address, all of that to match the current one. One of the tools that you can use to do this is the Mana toolkit. So what you do first is you modify the hostpad-mana conf to make sure you do the correct configuration for the AP. Then you run the start nat simple script. And then once that is run, you set up the Rogue AP and you can begin collecting information about it. So they're showing you a little bit of that here where you're editing those and running the scripts. So what we do in the end is we put together one of the best attacks out there is an evil twin. What the evil twin is when it looks just like the authorized access point. So let's say that there is a company. It's got 1,000 employees and 2 buildings that are right next to each other, and it's called CEH Corp. And so with CEH Corp, they're pretty good with security, fairly good, not totally, because I'm about to hack them. All right, so they're pretty good with security, but not good enough, because what they've done is they've made it kind of difficult for their employees to log into their Wi-Fi network. So what I do is I park my car outside one of their offices, and I bring up my own wireless access point, and I bring an actual wireless access point because I want to crank up the signal strength of the transceiver, and I borrow their SSID and their BSSID, and then I name my access point that to try to attract users. Now, what will happen if I do it that way is that the user will see that there's another access point, but when they connect to it, they won't have to log in and they might get suspicious. So why not do it a little bit different and change my SSID to saying that it is CEH Corp free Wi-Fi or CEH Corp guest Wi-Fi or something like that. So when they bring that up, they'll say, hey, I could just get a guest, and I don't have to go all the way into my login and everything with my 2-factor. This is great. And they connect to the guest Wi-Fi, and it takes them directly to the internet, and they're super happy. So there are all kinds of ways to do unauthorized Wi-Fi. And if my signal strength is strong enough, then I might be able to attract people to log in. So one of the attacks against Wi-Fi that people in their cars or sitting in a conference room or sitting nearby would do with a close-in attack is what's called a crack attack. And with a crack attack, it really allows a lot of things to happen, like steal sensitive information, credit card numbers, passwords, chat messages, emails, photos, and a lot more. So what I'd like to do is just give you a little bit of a look into how the crack attack works. So let's do a little bit of a dive into it. So when we look at the crack attack, first thing we have is a message. And this message, we have the anons, I'm announcing, right? This is authenticator nonce. So the access point generates this random number, and that's where this nonce is, right? So the anons sends its signal to the supplicant, which is over here. This guy's running Android, Linux, or something like that. This is pretty cool. And then the second thing we have here is the access point gives us that wireless connectivity, right? And then the supplicant, that's the device that's attempting to connect to the AP, is able to get into that AP. But let's look at the message 2 here. Right here, this is the S-nonce, the snonce, I like calling it that, the supplicant nonce. And this is combined with, do we see that here? This is actually combined with the MIC. And the MIC, the message integrity check. And so the supplicant's going to respond by generating their own random number. That's that S-nonce. And it uses the A-nonce, S-nonce, and a pre-shared key, and a PMK. Oh, by the way, the PMK is the pairwise master key. And what they use that to compute is the PTK. The PTK is a pairwise transient key. So what happens next is the supplicant is going to send the S-nonce and the MIC back to the AP to make sure that they assure data integrity. So the pre-shared key, the PMK, and the PTK are all very important for that. And so during the attack, what's going to happen is the attacker that has a cloned access point, what they're going to do is over here where we have that signed anons, what they're going to do is force a reuse of that signed anons, that cryptographic nonce. And in doing so, they'll be able to take over that conversation and snoop on that system. So that's the crack attack. And when the crack attack first came out, there was not a whole lot of ways to defend against it. But now, almost all operating systems and wireless access points have good defense against crack attacks. If you look over here, there are other options for this four-way handshake. So right now, we're looking at the exchange of the cryptographic nonce, the signed anons, etc. But we can do this is the pre-shared key mode, right? PSK. So we use that shared password. Very good if you're running a small business or a home. But then we have enterprise. So this is one of the ways that we can avoid this type of attack is by using 802.1x and something like a Radius server for authentication for more security. All right, so another type of attack that we can launch is a jamming attack. Sometimes I think I'm getting a jamming attack when I have my windows open in the car and somebody drives up next to me in a Harley and they have their radio on so loud that I can hear them jamming. Well, sometimes it's good music though, so it's not too bad. But that's not the type of jamming we're talking about. We're talking about flooding the wireless signal so much that you can't do anything. And that is because of CSMA-CA. Have you ever heard of CSMA-CA? There is a twin to it on a wired Ethernet networks called CSMA-CD. So what this stands for is carrier sense, multiple access. So a carrier is a carrier wave. You can imagine as a tone like ooh. So it has a little. It looks like a little sine wave. It's a carrier wave. What we're going to do is encode data later on. So a carrier sense. All right. I got a carrier. Right. That's what my wireless access device says. My laptop I'm holding in my hands. Multiple access. That means anybody can jump onto the network. So if there was a wired network, then there's an algorithm that's called collision detection. And in a wired network, there'd be a collision that's detected. There'd be a little back-off algorithm that would allow one device to wait while the other device talks, right? But with collision, we can't detect collisions on a wireless network, so we have to avoid them. So there's a whole different part of that algorithm that only allows one device to talk at a time. And because of the CSMA-CA algorithm, we have less that could communicate on a Wi-Fi wireless network than on an Ethernet wired network. And so what you do is you can get a high gain amplifier and you could just flood that with and make it impossible to see. Now, let me just talk a little bit about the EM spectrum, the electromagnetic spectrum. It's the same as light, but at a different frequency. So if you can imagine you're in a dim room and you have these sort of yellowish lights around the room on stands, right? In a dim room, every single one of those lights is distinguishable. And if they were blinking in a pattern, you could distinguish it. You would understand it. But then what you do is you take a giant, bright, powerful floodlight and you put it through the room and it's so bright you cannot see any of the other small lights because it washed them out. And so it's the same thing that's happening in this case. And there are tools to make this happen. Very interesting thing about these jammers. You see these jammers with their ranges, with their antennae, with their uses from CSMA-CD to 5G, all kinds of things. Do you know that these are illegal? In the United States of America, one thing that's legal is buying a firearm. You can go to a store and they take your details, they run a background check on you, and you got it. But you can't do certain things with it. You have to be very careful within the law to handle that firearm. This is different. This is actually less legal. That if I go to a jammer store, in fact, you could actually do a little lookup online and type in jammer store. There are actually stores that sell these. But then when you go to the United States government, it's illegal to buy, sell, or own them. So I'm not actually sure under which loopholes that we can do this, and I'm too afraid to buy a jammer, even though I could click it and add it to a cart. I will tell you this, though, there are many stories that I've done research on of somebody using a jammer, and then within a few minutes, federal agents come to their business or house and either make them stop, confiscate equipment, fine them. I think in the 2016, the Marriott was fined $600,000 or something like that from the FCC because of Wi-Fi jamming devices. Yet, when I go to conferences, I see these a lot. So I'm not sure where the loophole is. If you know what the loophole is, maybe you can let me know. I don't know. All right, so either way, they work. So let's talk about a few other types of attacks. This one is an alter attack. When you think of alter attack, think of LTE. I have a phone that uses LTE. There are many wireless cell phone protocols that are used for communication. What you want to remember on this one is it is a fake tower. So they use DNS spoofing. There are actually a series of tools that you can use. I used to show how to use these tools, but anyway, it's a series of tools that you can use. And what happens is you cause that user to connect to the fake tower, and then it's sort of a cross between a DOS and an MITM attack. All right, so the next thing we have is wide-jacking. So wide-jacking is actually very interesting. And with wide-jacking, we're doing several different types of attacks, including a karma attack, which is kind of a spoofing for wireless access. We send DAuth, run the karma. We're going to run a DNS mask, and we're going to wait for them to access their a page that shows up. And then once they do this, then they're going to capture stored credentials, and then you can extract their pre-shared key and run with it. Another one, this is actually interesting. You're in a store, someone bumps you, squeezing past you, and you don't know, but what they've done is they've captured, I think we talked about this before, your RFID by using an RFID cloning tool. And so they use tools like iCopy X and Arifid, Lurto, and so on. But you know what? If you are a maker, do you know what a maker is? A maker is somebody who goes at home and has hobbies creating cool things. One of the things that you can create with a Raspberry Pi is a Arifid cloner. So I went to Pi My Life Up, which is actually a pretty cool little site. And you need a Raspberry Pi, which you see over here to the left, and you need a breadboard. And if you have never used a breadboard, this is something that you should know how to do if you plan on being a hacker. You need to know how to breadboard, right? So you can even look that up online. Breadboard projects, do that, breadboard projects. And you'll find that there's all kinds of stuff you can do with a breadboard. It allows you to connect circuits together. Then you're going to need this right here, which is the RC255 chip. And you can create your own Raspberry Pi based Arifid cloner. It's actually pretty fun. All right, other things that you can do. You can crack the pre-shared key. You could do a DAuth. We've been talking about that. You could do an offline attack where you find all those, take those keys that you have that the hashes need to be cracked, and you just use larger computer systems or the cloud to hack them. You can do brute forcing, which is, you know, CPU, compute intensive, but it's possible. One of the tools for cracking those pre-shared keys is AirCrack, the suite of tools. And so we start with running AirMon monitor mode. We do air dump to get a list of detected access points. We'll do some of this in the lab. Also, we run air dump to capture the packets from the targeted access point. And then we run the air play command to send DAuth. And then we run the air crack command with a password.txt file with a bunch of passwords against the capture cap file, and then we might be able to find the password. It depends on how long that is, and it could take a long time. It could be so long that, yeah, again, you're going to have one of your universes expire. But usually people make pretty simple pre-shared keys. Another really cool tool is Fern. Fern is a Wi-Fi cracker tool that you can use, again, going into modern mode, scanning for access points, running that DAuth, capturing the WPA handshake. Again, that handshake, analyzing the handshake is always important. And then again, we're going to need a wordless file, then we can do the attack. And then we have WPA3 cracking. With WPA3 cracking, like I said, it's not as developed as all the others. But another thing I said earlier is it's got the dragon-based names for the attacks against the personal mode. So Dragon Slayer, Dragon Force, Dragon Drain. Now, you have to say it like that because you have to think of all the medieval dragon lore. So either way, that's what we use. And so what it does is it tries to exploit that dragonfly handshake and get underneath that dragonfly mechanism. This, I asked, I can't remember which LLM I asked, but to create a dragonfly attack. There it is. It's a dragonfly attack. That's actually not bad. It says dragonfly over here. I like that dragon. So I was able to make it put that. But in terms of side channel attacks, those are much more difficult to perpetrate against WPA3, but there are possibilities. All right, one of the tools we use, and we've seen this before in other modules, is Hashcat. So we're starting Airmon, and then we are capturing that handshake, and then we are running that DAuth, and then we're taking the converted captured cap file and converting it to an HCCapEx format. And then from there, we can run that on Hashcat and then use Hashcat to crack the pre-shared keys. Reaver. Oh, I was just talking about Wash. Remember we're talking about Wash? With Wash, what were we doing? We're grabbing WPS information. I really think both of these slides should be together, Wash and Reaver, because we use them together usually. In fact, if you look over here, down at the way bottom, we have Wash, right? Use the Wash utility. And that's what we're going to find and discover the WPS-enabled devices. And then we're going to use AirDump to go grab that information. And then we're going to use Reaver to actually do the cracking of the pen. So this is actually a pretty cool combination. We're using actually 3 tools here. Often you'll feed the results of one tool into another to make them more usable. Here in objective number 5, we're going to talk about countermeasures. So let's look into what we can do. All right, so with Wi-Fi, you know what? Most of all, what we're going to be looking at is the top 2 of the countermeasure overall, the ubiquitous countermeasures. Ubiquitous encryption and ubiquitous authentication. And to a certain extent, we'll talk about ubiquitous hardening. But if you look at this, for instance, using a password with at least 12 to 16 characters. And if you are taking the CEH exam, use that as your answer. But if you're in the real world, you really want a 20-character pre-shared key, not 12 to 16 characters, because that's getting more and more hackable every day. Disable TKIP and use AES. Turn off WPS. In fact, right now, we're almost finished with this module. What I would ask you to do is to log in to your edge device, whoever it is, if it's Comcast or whatever your provider is. And if WPS is turned on, turn it off. And don't forget this, save the setting. So turn it off and save the setting, because that is very hackable. You may just have a neighbor that would love to hack your WPS. Also, limit the signal range. So let's say that I'm in a building, and there's the front of the building over there. Normally, you would put the wireless access point in the center so that it hits all around. But what if in the front of the building, right there is a parking lot where people could listen in on that Wi-Fi signal? So maybe move it towards the back of the building. So make sure you do that. Then WPA3, and when you do WPA3, make sure that everything is using WPA3, and the wireless access point cannot switch to WPA2. And look at this number 1 for Alter. Encrypt. Hey, what did I say? Ubiquitous encryption. DNS queries. Resolve DNS queries using what? Ubiquitous encryption. HTTPS, right? So integrity protection, anti-spoofing, use DNS. Again, CRYPT protocol for authentication communications. AES 256, more and more encryption. So these are defending against Alter attacks. And then rogue APs. You need to know in your organization what all the APs are in your organization. Scan for them. Making sure you know what devices are currently allowed to be access points. And then for the ones that aren't, you need to block them. Make sure that no other ports are allowed too, because you could have an employee, and the employee might bring in their own wireless access point and plug it into a port. So protecting your switch ports becomes extremely important also. And then when we look at some of the others, configuration, change no defaults. Defaults are bad for network defense. You really could do what I was talking about, those people that were talking about disabling their SSID broadcasts and doing MAC association. That could be a small speed bump. Might take extra time if you want to use those. Making sure that you use a nice, strong pre-shared key that's difficult to guess. And anytime you're on enterprise, or if you really want to protect your home network, you can use 802.1x. Things that you can do. One item that you can do is use WIPS. Use WIPS. That's Wireless Intrusion Prevention System. So what that's going to do is it's going to give you threat detection. Cisco, they make a very good app here. They've been getting better and better at this. But that's one of them. And then we also have others like Fern, we talked about before, OWASP, Boop Suite, Wi-Fi, and this is WatchGuard. WatchGuard really makes a very good app also. So there are many different ways to defend your wireless network. And especially for those of you at home, this is the time to go back and review your wireless network. Hey, you might want to take time if you find that it has misconfigurations or what. You might want to take the time to attack your own wireless. Just pen test your own wireless. But once you're finished playing with it, go back through and lock it down. No WPS. Make sure your pre-shared key is, not your friend's, the name of their car or whatever. You want to make sure it's a nice long passphrase that can help you avoid getting hacked. In this module, we've talked about some of the issues with Wi-Fi that make it so hackable. Some of the possibilities with Wi-Fi that makes it so hackable. And we've talked about some of the techniques that you can use to do your own Wi-Fi hacking. We've talked about a lot of protocols, methodologies, and what we're going to do next is try it out in the lab. We have a few pretty cool exercises to do in the lab. And once you finish that, or if you have already done that, then join me in the next module.